good morning. There you are. Here I am. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Megan Howard. I'm the associate pastor here. When I don't preach, I typically play. So when I do preach, Aaron plays. So you get the best of both worlds every week, right? So we are on week 3 of our Table Talk series, and it's always a joy to be with you in this capacity. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. Whether you're here or you happen to be watching us online, we are so glad that you have joined us. We do a lot of technology stuff here, so we invite you to tweet and post along. I don't have my electronic devices up here, so I don't know whether you're doing it or not. So go for it. That's my only thing. So have at it. We're on week 3, and we are doing this series at the beginning of the year to help us kind of set the tone so that we can really begin to make good decisions in 2017. Not the decisions we made in 2016 were bad, but just to help us make some really good ones here in this new year. We began the year talking about prayer and what it looks like to have peace in our life, and how peace really in our life can't start until we have this peace that only comes with God. And then last week, Aaron talked about what it means to wait, whether you're waiting for good things to happen, whether you're waiting through difficult times, or you're just waiting because you're waiting. What that looks like then, and how we wait, and really wait wisely in the midst of life. And today, we're going to look at something that affects you, and unfortunately, something that even affects me. Now, I know you all know that I'm perfect, right? Exactly, I know. I've told you. I want you to be fully aware that I am, right? So unfortunately, this thing even affects me. It doesn't keep sides. This thing that's inside of us, it has no preference. It likes those who are old, those who are young, those who are green and purple. It has no distinctions whatsoever, and it does not discriminate. This thing ultimately keeps us from accomplishing incredible things. And it causes us to do things that we wouldn't normally do otherwise. Let me give you some examples. This thing keeps you from being happy when others succeed. It makes you jealous for something you might not even know you wanted. It keeps you from saying sorry even when you are only 2% wrong. You're still wrong, right? Keeps you from saying, well, they're wronger. This thing keeps you from taking responsibility and saying, I made a mistake. It keeps you from acknowledging those weaknesses that you have. It keeps you from asking help because you already know how to do everything better than anybody else, right? Anybody guilty of that? Like, if you want to do something, you don't want any help, because if you just have somebody help you, they're going to screw it up. So you might as well just do it yourself. Yep. This thing causes you to feel good when others fail. It causes you to cheat, to lie, to belittle somebody else, to want to impress others, and to compare yourself because you're not as bad as your neighbor. It causes you to think and even say, I'm not doing that because it's not my job. It causes you to feel as if you're invincible. No one can touch you because it's hammer time, right? If I was really good, I was going to dance, but you do not want to see that. That would prove even more that I'm really not perfect if I tried to do that. This does not shuffle well. This thing that's inside all of us keeps us blinded and unaware of our constant need for God. Anybody know what it is? The first service had it down. They were perfect with it. Pride. See, maybe we just didn't want to admit we knew what it was. This isn't the kind of pride that you have in your kids or your grandkids. It's not that pride that you take the picture and then we post it online saying, look how awesome my kid is. It's not that type of pride necessarily. This isn't even the pride that we have in our work, our accomplishments, that isn't just all about us, but it's an accomplishment that we like to share. It's not even that kind of pride. This is the ugly pride. The pride that we try to hide. The pride that leads to jealousy, greed, comparison, selfishness, arrogance. That feeling that we have to make ourselves bigger than we really are. Thoughts of me, myself, and I. It's all about me. My world revolves around me. The world revolves around me. C.S. Lewis, in his book Mere Christianity, said this about pride. The essential vice, the utmost evil, is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all of that are mere flea bites and comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind. This kind of pride is our greatest enemy. It causes us to do things we wouldn't normally do and act in ways we wouldn't normally act. It causes us to even say things that we wouldn't normally say. And because of this, it keeps us from accomplishing things for the world. And ultimately, it can get in the way of what God has created us to do. So happy Sunday. I want you to know, though, we aren't the only ones that have had to deal with this. Pride is a product of the garden all the way back in Genesis. And since then, it has been waging war in the hearts of God's people ever since. In fact, there's a story that comes out of 2 Chronicles chapter 26. So if you have your Bibles with you, I want to invite you to join me there. If you don't, I got it on the screen and got you complete covered, so you're good. This is the story of King Uzziah. I like that name. I had to listen to it just to make sure I pronounced it right. King Uzziah. He was one of the kings of Judah. If we recall, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, they were split, and they each kind of had their own line of kings. King Uzziah was the king of Judah from 791 to 740, so he reigned for about 52 years. In verse 4, it says this: he, being the king, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. He sought God during the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of God. Here it is. As long as he sought the Lord, as long as his eyes were on God, as long as he was listening to what God had to say, God gave him success. So then there are a bunch of chapters that we're going to skip, or a bunch of verses we're going to skip. But basically it talks about how this king, he went to war, he broke down walls, he rebuilt towns. He had these great victories against the Philistines, the Arabs, Gur-Baal, the Meunites. He became a famous king in the land, and for this he became very powerful. His reign gave rise to the building of towers and gates and city walls in Jerusalem. He had a well-trained, probably the best trained army at the ready, with only the best equipment. It must have been all Apple-made. It appeared that King Uzziah was moving right along and living into peace and prosperity. Verse 15. His fame spread far and wide, for he was greatly helped until he became powerful. But, and I don't know about you, but I don't really like seeing buts sometimes. But, it says, after Uzziah became powerful, his pride, his pride led to his downfall. He was unfaithful to the Lord his God and entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar. He was unfaithful, it said, unfaithful to God. He had allowed his pride to cause him to do something he wouldn't normally have done, which was disobeyed God. He let his pride keep him from accomplishing some amazing things for the kingdom. He was unfaithful, and he entered the temple of the Lord. He didn't just walk in and sit down. He went to the place that only the priests were permitted to go. It's called the Holy of Holies. And if you weren't a priest, there was no going in, no questions asked. You didn't go in there, period. I mean, this would be like us totally ignoring an authorized personnel only sign. There's a reason only authorized personnel are permitted past, because they are authorized personnel, right? Security guards would stop you. So imagine this. I'll bring it into our own kind of world. Imagine you're at the White House, and maybe you've reached a higher status within the community, and you're thinking really high of yourself, and you're like, look at who I am. I'm just going to walk right into the Oval Office. I mean, authorized personnel only into the Oval Office. Yes? You just barge right in. Do you think somebody would try to stop you? A little bit. You think somebody would try to tackle you? Yeah, okay. So we just don't go somewhere without the VIP access only. We don't go somewhere that we're not supposed to go. King Uzziah, because his pride had led him to this point, felt that nobody could touch him. He was completely untouchable. So he decided, I'm the king. I want to go burn incense on the altar. No one's going to stop me. Verse 17. Azariah the priest, with 80 other courageous priests of the Lord, followed him in. The security team followed him in. They confronted him and they said, it is not right for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. This is for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Leave the sanctuary, for you have been unfaithful, and you will not be honored by the Lord God. So the security team, they tried to warn him, they plead with him to stop. But again, his pride had reached a dangerous level. I mean, who was going to stop him? He was the king. He was famous, powerful. These little peon priests weren't going to do anything. These little junior security guards weren't going to touch him. It's not like they were the FBI. Have you ever tried to warn someone who was so filled with pride to stop their actions and behavior? It's pretty difficult if you've never tried. Because usually at this point, they are so blinded by what's going on, they don't see their pride has reached a dangerous territory. All they see is what they want, how they can get it, and how fast they can get it. They have no concern for anything or anyone else. They can't see their behavior has become dangerous. They can't see that this relationship that they want, that they know is right for them, maybe has reached an unhealthy spot. They can't see that their addiction has gotten a hold of them too much. They can't see that their busy life is wrecking their home. And when you try to have a conversation with them, they ignore you. They tell you you don't know their life and stay out of it. Or maybe you are that person. See, sometimes we can become so filled with pride that we lose sight of who we are and whose we are. We forget where we came from. That's why when people from smaller areas get famous, we always hear the statement, don't forget where you came from. Because we know that fame and fortune and power can cause you to become prideful and forget kind of the process that it took you to get there. Sometimes we forget where we came from. We fail to recognize what we are even doing to our own life. Our world consists of me, myself, and I, and the power that we do hold is no longer leveraged for others, but leveraged for me and how we can gain the most. I mean, if we look at the king's story, he leveraged early on his power for the kingdom, for others, and God made him successful. He followed God's direction, and the nation benefited. But the more power he got, the more pride filled his heart, and the less he recognized his need for God. But here he is in this moment. Like, he's standing in the middle of the Holy of Holies in front of the temple, or in the temple in front of the altar of God. See, I'm really not perfect. Living example of my pride this morning. This is his moment when he could have just backed down, backed away. He could have owned up to his mistake and literally laid it on the altar, saying, look, I screwed up. I made a mistake. I have been unfaithful. I have gotten away from doing what the Lord has asked me to do. I have let my power overtake my actions, and I was about to do something that I shouldn't. This was his moment. This was his opportunity to humble himself. Verse 19. Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand, and if you don't know what one of those is, it's like a little ball that's kind of on a chain that's got incense in it, and it kind of burns, and again, you get that nice aroma. He had one of those in his hand. He's ready to burn incense, and instead of humbling himself, saying, I'm just going to put this here because it doesn't belong to me. I don't need this anymore. My power has gotten too big. I get what I did. I'm sorry. Instead of that, he became angry. And while he was raging at the priest in the presence of the Lord before the incense altar, leprosy broke out on his forehead. So instead of taking the high road of humility, he continued down this path and let his pride go before him because he was angry. He was ushered out of the temple by the priests. And for the rest of his days, this king lived with leprosy and was excluded from the temple and had to live in a separate house. His story ends in verse 23. Uzziah rested with his fathers and was buried near them in a field for burial that belonged to the kings. And this is kind of the final dig. For he was known that he had leprosy. So because of his pride, his legacy wasn't as this great king who followed God and was successful. His legacy wasn't that he had great armies that conquered nations, that rebuilt walls, that made Jerusalem a strong powerhouse. His legacy wasn't a God-fearing man. His legacy was, oh yeah, King Uzziah. He's the one with leprosy. Because he let his pride go before him instead of God. I don't know about you, but I don't know that I want to have the same fate as King Uzziah. Being secluded from everything with leprosy on my face and body doesn't sound like a good time to me. Anybody want to sign up for that? Nope, I didn't think so. I mean, I'm sure there are other diseases that are just as bad, but leprosy doesn't sound like fun. It's not my idea of a good time. We read before that his downfall was his pride. However, the major part of this downfall was when he was standing before God with people willing to help him, people saying, look, we understand you made a mistake. We'll help you get out of it. We'll help you fix this. We'll help you along the way. But please don't do this. His downfall was when he stood before God and before them and was unable to claim his brokenness. He was unable to own up to his mistake. He was unable to get on his knees and seek forgiveness. He was unable to humble himself and surrender this pride that had so filled his life. Pride is a dangerous thing, and it will absolutely destroy you if you aren't careful. I love what John Stott, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's an author and evangelical preacher and speaker. He said, pride then is more than the first of the 7 deadly sins. It is the essence of all sins. For it is the stubborn refusal to let God be God with the corresponding ambition to take his place. It's the attempt to dethrone God and enthrone ourselves. So pride is our stubborn refusal, he said. It's our stubborn refusal to let God be God with the goal of taking his place. Ouch. Pride is a disease of our heart. But I got some good news. You ready for some good news? It's like the hush fell over the crowd, I can tell. Again, happy Sunday. There is an answer for our pride. The answer for our pride isn't more pride, although our pride would want you to think that it is. See, the answer for our pride is humility. You see, if pride destroys life, our humility can heal it. Now, this humility is twofold, at least in my opinion. And because you're all sitting here, you're going to hear my opinion, right? You may think otherwise, but for me this week as I was doing this, I thought, our humility is twofold. And you can't have one without the other, and how I was looking at it. It's like cake and ice cream. Can't have one without the other. It's like Oreos and milk, Tonto and the Lone Ranger. One without the other, right? Sonny and Cher, peanut butter and jelly, Pittsburgh and winning. We're still in the playoffs, that's all I got to say. Or John and Megan. Again, we go together. One without the other, it doesn't happen. So humility is twofold. Again, we can't have one without the other. The first part of humility is our surrender, or I like to call it, this is the moment when we have to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves, right? Surrender. You see, this pride has a strange way of blinding us to our constant need for God. because we are human and not God, there will never be a point in life where you and I don't need God. There won't come a day when we can say, God, go ahead, take a vacation. You deserve it. You've been working really hard lately. We'll take it for a while. No big deal. Nor will there ever be a day when God looks at us and says, I'm going to take a 3-month sabbatical. You look like you got a good handle on things. Be careful, don't burn the place down. It's not going to happen. Why? Because pride fills our life. We need God. Sin fills our life. We need God. So there's never a point in life when we don't need God. We don't like to admit this, though. We like to think we can do this life thing called life on our own. Yes? Would you agree? There are some days you wake up and you're like, I'm good. I got this thing down. No one's going to tell me how to do this. And most days are pretty good, right? Except when they're not. We usually do okay, except when we don't. And it's not often we fall apart, except when we do. See, our pride and our stubbornness, our selfishness and arrogance tell us that we are fine and that we have everything that we could possibly want. And the reality is, we may be fine. We may have everything we could possibly imagine. But when we live our life based on our pride and our own selfishness, we still lack the only thing we need. And this is where the king was at when he stood before the altar. He had it all, but he had lost sight of the one thing that he needed in his life, and that was God. So I'm going to go back to John Stout. He said this regarding humility. He wrote an entire paper on pride and humility. And this is what he said about humility. And he's a really smart guy. This week I felt like I knew nothing when I was doing some of the reading about him. He said this about humility. Humility is honestly acknowledging the truth about ourselves. That as creatures, we depend on our Creator's power, not on our own power. We depend on our Creator's power. And as sinners, we depend on our Savior's grace. So basically what he is saying is humility is admitting and accepting that God is God and I am not. And it is not about me. And that we need God every single day, all the time. See, the majority of our pride, in my opinion, again, this is take it or leave it, in my opinion, the majority of our pride stem from the fact that we are stubborn people and are unwilling to admit that we need help and that we need constant dependence on God. How many of you are willing to say you're stubborn? Well, first step is always recognition, so congratulations. So if we ever want to not end up on the verge of a downfall like the king, we have to be willing to say, God, I need you. Not just once. I need you all the time. We have to be willing to say that we're broken, that we've strayed from where we need to be, and maybe we're even created to be, that we've made mistakes along the way, and that we can't do this alone. Again, this isn't a one and done. This isn't we say it today and we're good for the rest of our life. At moments, we need that daily recognition that, God, I depend on you more than I feel like I should, but I need you all the time. When we come to God and surrender our pride, he won't tell us, and he's not going to look at us like I've done before and maybe you have too. I told you so. I told you were going to need me. You didn't listen. I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you. You go down this road, eventually you're going to come crawling back to me. He's not going to say that. Rather, God is there to help us get back up on our feet. James, the brother of Jesus, said, humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. God will begin to lift us up as we daily lift our eyes up to him. And when we do this, again, humility is twofold. When we begin to understand this concept that it's not about me, that it's about God, and it's that we have an utter dependence every single day, when we can begin to see this and claim it, our eyes are then open to the second aspect of humility, and that is serving others, or as I like to call it, thinking for you. And I'll get to that in a minute. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the people in Philippi. He said, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others." So the second aspect of humility is thinking for you, not thinking for you. I don't want to think for you. I have a hard enough time thinking for myself. But it's thinking, what can I do for you? You see, when life isn't about us, when it's not about me, myself, and I, when we remove that, we understand that, you know what? Their need is probably greater than mine. What can I do for you? How can I pray for you? I think this is really hard because there are some people we don't want to pray for. But we understand that we have a constant need for God and that our need is not any greater than anybody else's because it's not about us. We begin to see that there are people who need us to pray for them regardless. How can I pray for you? How can I be helpful for you? When we remove us out of the equation, our pride doesn't have anywhere to go because our pride is based on me. When we think of doing something for someone else rather than what can we get from you, our focus shifts from selfish pride to service. This is why Paul said, you want to stop pride dead in its tracks? Do nothing out of selfish ambition. Don't even walk down the road of being vain and conceited, but look to the interests of others. And serving others and thinking for them means that we help them succeed. And we are excited for them when they do. We cheer them on. We publicly share joys and concerns. We celebrate what God has given them rather than saying, what about me? We acknowledge that no job is too big or too small. One of my favorite shows to watch is Undercover Boss. Anybody watch that show? And what I love about Undercover Boss is the bosses recognize, you know what, I'm not too big, I'm not too powerful to do the menial jobs that the employees do, right? When we think for somebody else, we understand that there's not a job that's too big or too small. We take out the trash. Why? Because it needs taken out. We don't let somebody else do it because that's not my job. We look for ways to help. We volunteer in ministry because it's not about me. It's about the kids that need food. It's about the people that need clothes. We get involved with causes around the city. We understand that regardless of our social status, we are like everybody else. Just because I am up here doesn't make me any different than you. I am still a sinner saved by the grace of God from my own selfish pride, just like you. We look for ways to use what God has blessed us with to serve somebody else. I don't know where you're at other than you're sitting there this morning. I don't know where your heart is at. Maybe you're like the king. And if you feel like I've literally beat you up this morning, I'm sorry, that certainly wasn't my intention. But maybe you feel like you're the king. Maybe you feel like part of your life has been kind of selfish and you're filled with this pride maybe you didn't even know you had until today. And if that's where you're at, then we've got a decision we need to make. Because you can either continue to live the way that you want, having it be all about you, or you can humble yourself and say, God, I made a mistake. I need you to help me get out of this because I can't do it on my own. Maybe you're not there. Maybe you're on the other side of that, and you've already been there. You've already dealt with your pride. Maybe even you've experienced your pride causing your downfall. I pray that this is a reminder to you that pride can creep up at any moment of the day. And I know that because of how we are structured as a society and a culture. And our dependence on technology makes this so much easier, whatever it is. Didn't go to school for English, by the way. We post a picture and we immediately see how many people liked it. And that pride goes up. Oh, they liked my picture. They liked my stuff. Pride can creep up at any moment because we then look at the next picture that our friends posted. Well, they don't have any likes on theirs. May this be a reminder that pride can creep up at any time. And I pray that we begin to do those things on a daily basis that help us stay aware of that constant need for God. And again, that's that recognition that it's not about us, it's about others. It's not about us, but it's about God. And I pray that we begin living into that calling to think for somebody else. So may all of us this morning come to realize that pride will only destroy and keep us from the life that we've been created to live. Whereas humility can completely heal us and help us embrace this life that God has given us so that we can live it abundantly and that we can embrace this life of living not only for God every day, but for somebody else. Sound good? I got one nod. That's all I needed. I'm good to go, right? All right. So I think it's fitting today that we are ending with communion because the cross is the ultimate example of what humility is. Because we have Jesus, who was fully God and yet fully man, saying, I am willing to do this for you. I don't have to. I don't have to do it. I could make you love me. I could make you follow me. I could make you do everything. But because I love you, I'm not going to. And because I know you can't save yourself, I'm going to do it for you. So he crawled upon the cross. And he emptied himself, as Paul said, of everything but love for us. And when we come and we take communion, we are reminded of the grace that we are given as people of God. The grace that we are given when we come to him and say, my pride overtook me. Please forgive me. And today we get to enter into that and say, thank you. May you go in the grace and the love of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has come for you and is waiting for you. Just come and tell him you need him. Not once, not twice, but each and every single day. May you experience his love and his grace this day. Amen.